Hello everyone, this is Tyler with Fayette Area Dog Training. I'm making a video here mainly for a student of mine whom I'm doing a virtual apprenticeship with. However, this is also useful for any members of the general public that may watch this since I am making this public on YouTube. What I've tried to illustrate here is a little bit of like a drive breakdown. What I think a dog goes through when they are experiencing what I'm going to call a drive stimulation. Now, it's important to have some definitions made clear here. Drive, I think we can say, is this dog's desire to do something. And a lot of times we think of drive as like a natural, innate, or genetic desire. Of course, we can develop and build drive, but typically the dog's going to come preloaded with most of that stuff. And then a drive stimulation is what it takes for that drive to be unlocked or activated. So a dog with a lot of, say, prey drive, it's not probably going to take a lot to stimulate that drive. So their threshold, as you can see there on the illustration, is going to be pretty low. Now, when we think about a dog that is stimulated in prey drive, usually that's when we throw something for them and they chase it. And for a dog with a lot of prey drive, it doesn't take a lot for them to want to chase something. Now, I'm going to choose to illustrate what I think a dog goes through when they experience defense drive. And I'm going to choose that because, number one, I think we see it all play out a little more clearly. I mean, dogs that get overstimulated in prey drive, I don't think we typically see a lot of behaviors, although you can. Sometimes the dog may become overly possessive over something, or they may even become aggressive at that point. But defense drive is also, I think, something that we have to be very cautious of the dog getting overstimulated in. Because when that starts to happen, you can have some pretty devastating effects. Whereas, I have a dog right now I'm working with that gets a little bit too possessive over things if the prey drive's overstimulated. And the remedy to that, we just maybe take a little walk to decompress or something like that. It's not typically that difficult to deal with. So the first thing you're going to see in the illustration here is I have a little bit of a graph set up. The bottom horizontal line isn't meant to really illustrate much, but the one on the side, the vertical line, is meant to illustrate kind of in a quantitative manner the drive stimulation. So if you can consider like 0 things are added to the dog situation on the left, the dog's not stimulated in drive. And then that leaves us in that little area between the bottom black line and the green line that illustrates threshold. Now, for a defensive dog, let's think of the example of maybe a mailman walking up to the door. A defensive dog, that may activate the threshold. So you've now provoked the dog's defense drive. We see that so often with our pet dogs, a lot of, especially our German Shepherd pet dogs in this region, which for public viewers, if there are any, this is southwestern Pennsylvania. So the dog's defense drive has now been activated, provoked, whatever you want to think about. But it's been provoked due to a certain level of drive stimulation. And that's relative to each dog. Some dogs, like I said, may have more drive, so that threshold's probably going to be a bit lower. It's not going to take as much to activate that. Excuse me. So drive gets activated, they hit threshold, and pretty soon they start to enter their drive margin. The drive margin is the blue point there, which I'll highlight here in a moment. But the important thing with the drive margin to consider, in my opinion, is that's the moment where the dog is in drive and they're still thinking pretty clearly. Okay. Again, to refer back to prey drive, which I'm not illustrating here, but in prey drive, you may throw the ball for the dog and all of a sudden you've provoked that drive, and that margin is pretty wide. You can just keep doing that over and over again. And I think the key there is it's hard to add a lot more stimulation. Unless the dog gets more stimulated to just, based on the amount of time that you're doing that for. So if you just keep throwing the ball and the dog keeps getting more and more stimulated, then you could reach a displacement level potentially in prey drive. But most of the time we can just keep throwing ball with the dog, and the dog stays within its margin of prey drive, and then you can put the ball away, and all of a sudden you're under threshold again. But with the defense drive dog, defense drive is a little bit more serious. A lot of times when dogs feel a defensive mindset, they feel like a sort of a fight or flight sort of sensation. So we have to be very careful with that once again. So as I was saying, you cross over threshold and you start to enter your drive margin. This is now potentially where the mailman is walking up to the door and your dog is still barking, giving like a guttural bark, maybe some growling. The hair's still up. They're like pouncing at the door. Maybe like slobber's going everywhere. Ears are forward. The dog's like, I have to defend my space here. This person can't come in here. They got to go away. And unfortunately, a lot of the times what happens is your mailman just naturally goes away and your dog is back down under threshold. And then your dog thinks, wow, I won. That was what I was supposed to do. The drive was stimulated. The dog behaved in that margin, and mailman left, and they're like, cool, I did the right thing. The other end of that, though, is if the dog is pushed further and further in defense drive, they start to enter what I call, or a lot of us call, displacement. And the picture I typically think of to represent this is a dog that's doing bite work. So they're on a back tie, in my mind. Maybe the handler's off at a distance, and the dog starts coming out. They're barking at the decoy. They're having fun. But maybe the decoy doesn't recognize that the dog is giving a very low type of bark, and the body's very tense, and little things that we're not seeing. What's happening is the dog's defense drive is starting to get stimulated. And then all of a sudden the decoy comes in, maybe gives an improper body posture, because if the decoy is trying to work the dog in a prey drive, but the dog's not perceiving the situation that way, the decoy postures in a certain manner that he or she's not thinking about, and the dog starts to go a little bit overboard and get overstimulated in defense drive. Then we start to see behaviors like the dog starting to look away. Maybe they're not barking as much, and they start doing some of that yawning that a lot of people talk about now. Sniffing the ground, may release anal glands. If the handler's nearby, they may just start jumping up on the handler. I've seen dogs just start barking at their handler, almost like demand barking, or maybe just walking away. And when I think about displacement, it's similar to a dog in an avoidance sort of state of mind. They're trying to avoid a situation or change the subject, and essentially the dog enters that flight state of mind. And that's a bad thing. We don't want the dog to enter that point. The only time we want the dog to get close to that point is if we were trying to widen the dog's defense drive margin. And that's something that we may do, for example, with a working dog that is going to be trained in some sort of apprehension work, or a sport dog that has to do bite work. We want to get them close to that upper level of their margin and then back them back down. But for most of our pet dogs, we don't want to enter that point at all. We don't want to even get close to the point of displacement when it comes to the defense drive. Most of the time with our pet dogs, what we want to do is not so much widen that margin, but we typically want to increase or move the threshold up. Okay. So what I'm illustrating here is that we may want to, these are, like I said, for our working dogs or sport dogs, we may sometimes want to widen the margin so they can operate in defense drive a little bit longer. But again, for a lot of our pet dogs, my focus is to simply raise the threshold. take that green line and maybe we move it up to where the red line was, right like this. So we want to take the threshold when we tell the dog, hey, when the mailman walks up to the door, that is not the point at which you need to feel defensive. Now the problem is a lot of us aren't prepared to remedy that, right? A simple remedy, in my opinion, would be that the door is blocked off. The dog just can't see the mailman walk up. And we work on this maybe out on a public walk. Our dog sees a person and we start doing some counter conditioning measures, walking the dog in a different direction, some play, some other sort of interaction. We tell the dog, hey, like that's not a defensive picture. But naturally, I think when we raise the threshold, we also start to kind of widen that margin because then our level for displacement requires more drive stimulation as well. But again, this is all just a way that I make sense of this picture. And I hope it makes sense for everybody watching. And my student, please feel free to comment. And anyone else in the public, feel free to comment below. Thank you.